This is ImmunoAfrica, a podcast dedicated to spotlighting African immunology research.
Hello, I'm excited to have you join me on this edition of ImmunoAfrica's Graduate Student Series. This series offers emerging and aspiring immunologists the opportunity to connect with, learn from, and be inspired by some of the most talented immunology graduate students from Africa. This year, we peek into the fascinating work and busy lives of 4 immunologists in training, representing 3 African countries, Benin, Mozambique, and Nigeria. Vania, Segun, Onyeka, and Deo-Gracias joined me to talk about the challenges they are addressing in the field of immunology, which include training immune cells to fight cancers better, protecting fetuses from maternal parasitic infections, characterizing immune responses locally, and designing a multi-target vaccine. Away from their diverse interests and unique journeys, these talented scientists are driven by a singular purpose, an unwavering commitment to helping Africa realize its full potential in scientific research and development. Our final guest on this series is Segun Afolaranmi. Segun attended medical school at the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, and he went on to complete, after which he went on to complete his intern year of clinical practice. Along the line, he developed keen interest in science and cancer immunology towards the end of his medical school. And that was because he experienced and noticed that there were limited options for treating the disease in this part of the world. So he received the Clarendon Scholarship for his master's in Integrated Immunology at the University of Oxford. And afterwards, he joined the Roche lab at the Cancer Research UK, Cambridge in January 22 for his PhD in Cancer Immunology. He got funding from the Gates Cambridge Trust for his PhD, which is also currently undergoing. Alongside his scientific interests, Segun is very passionate about expanding training opportunities for young scientists in Africa, as well as working with others to accelerate access to cancer therapeutics on the continent. And of course, Segun is also the co-founder of the Ganglion Initiative, which is a platform that bridges the gap between a platform that bridges the gap, in access to skills, education, and opportunities for students, secondary school students, and young people in Nigeria to just ensure that they have access to global opportunities and make them better prepared to access those opportunities. Yeah. So Segun, it's great seeing you today and having this chat with you.
That's not me, but I appreciate you. Right now, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I think the typical question I ask is why immunology? But I think before we go into immunology and why cancer immunology, maybe just take us briefly on your journey so far and how you got here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, so I mean, I did medical school in Nigeria, like most misguided people who thought they were doing well in secondary school. So, but I actually really liked, so I mean, I normally say to people that I actually didn't apply to medicine first. I wanted to do engineering, and I applied to engineering straight out of high school. But I had a very misguided reason for doing engineering because I was always interested in medicine, actually. So I had 1 year where I did A-levels, and this was when I really enjoyed biology at the A-level because we're talking about systems, circulatory, not just like drawing cockroaches and some of those things that we did, which I never enjoyed. So I thought, okay, then maybe it wasn't bad. So that's what led me into medicine in the first place. And I never really thought about what kind of problems I wanted to address in medicine until much later, when I started seeing that there was good and very important focus on infectious diseases, but it looked like we were now beginning to experience a surge in non-communicable diseases. So around midway through my medical school, I started picking interest in non-communicable diseases, and I thought cancer was a huge one. All over the wards where I trained, there was almost nothing, that we could offer cancer patients in this environment. So really what I wanted to do was to get involved in, I'm training to be a surgeon, but also like to be on the side a cancer researcher. So I wanted to go for grad school there to try to get cancer research. And then I just was reading and I saw that, okay, potentially very promising way to address cancer is, immunology. And I loved immunology as a medical student. So why not? So I applied to a master's. So it was more of me trying to look for what was the best way for me to train myself and get good training to address the problem I've chosen to focus my career on, which was cancer research alongside my clinical practice. And then I thought, so immunology was very interesting one, and it's a very promising way to treat cancer. And so that's what led me to this master's and PhD now. Yeah.
Amazing. So I've read a few, maybe one or two interviews about you, and maybe one. And then there was this event you attended that kind of just created this wildfire in your heart concerning cancer research, this spark. And so I think I want you to comment on that event, and also maybe also highlight how exposure and our exposures, experiences, and the individuals we get to meet with contribute to the kind of interest or the aspect of research or the kind of interest we're developing with regards to scientific research.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can't overemphasize the role of exposure, especially for some of us where we didn't really come from very privileged backgrounds. So we started the race late in life, and you need to acknowledge that in the sense that like other people, just by virtue of where they were born, by virtue of who they were born to, were miles ahead. So they knew things, they had people tell them things, they had people promote things to them. So most of us only begin to get into those kind of circles in university, which is already 6 years behind some other people, or even a decade behind some other people. So I think one of the things that helped me the most and my group of friends in medical school, in university, was that we applied ourselves and we really tried to, within reasonable limits, get involved with things. I remember one very fun thing that we went for. We went for Lagos Model United Nations. The people were wondering what medical students were doing there. We're probably the first set of medical students that went for events like that. And we won awards and all that. And every other person was a law student or international affairs, but it was very good. We got to talk. We talked about many different things, and it just improved our ability to, to really talk to people, to network and grow. But of course, like, we started, we went for a very big healthcare students conference, and then we came back home with my friends, and we also organized a big healthcare student conference for Africans. And so, those conversations were just happening at the same time, and with very, inspiring people. So it got us thinking and saying, okay, what could we contribute on our own personal levels to advance our own selves primarily, and hopefully in that process of advancing our own selves, we might be able to, like, do something that would be meaningful. So that's where all of that comes. So I'm going to encourage anybody listening and folks that are still in university, seek out activities like that. And many of them, it doesn't, people often want to go to those places and maybe talk to somebody and get a scholarship there. That's not it. It's just really sowing seeds of like, changing the way you approach things, changing the way you gradually over time, think about, what do I want to spend my life doing? What are the things I want to contribute to? I think that's where it adds up over time. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that advice. So it's important not to just box ourselves to, I'm studying physics or biochemistry or medicine, let me just face my book. We have to expose ourselves to different things, because that will determine how we think and what we can think about. Yeah, thank you very much. So, regards your research, so you talked about how that around medical school, you started developing this interest in immunology and cancer and all of that, and having a focus for your research. So I think they probably would have something about the immune system that drew your attention, or about cancer. You already talk about the access to therapies and how that, this part of the world and all of that, but maybe just take us through that journey, or how that interest developed and how it has evolved over time. Maybe what has changed, and what aspect of that initial interest are you still holding on to?
Yeah, I mean, I usually don't have like fairy tales and dreamy things about interest. But when people ask me, why do people write off for funny things about why they did medicine, which is very good, which is that maybe some people saw it in dreams. So I didn't see anything in dream, and I also didn't see immunology in dream. So it was quite organic, right? I think it's an incredibly complex and fascinating system, and it's not because that's what everybody says in the books. It's everywhere in the body. It's everything in the body essentially. So I think that was very fascinating. And also, like you, it's very, very, now that I work very closely with the cells, but then it was just very fascinating that like these people go everywhere. These things do these things. They help with this. They help with infection. They help with cancer. They help with almost everything. They can go haywire. So I mean, I didn't think there was any other system then. I mean, that at that much level of, intricate details with like multiple self-organizing, very, very complex and also like very simple in that sense of how you think about it. So I think it's just all the multiple parts coming together, working together in unison. I think that was very impressive about the immune system. But for me, again, it was also quite pragmatic because it was around the time when like, it was this beginning of this decade, halfway through the previous decade where there was huge, activity on, CAR T cell therapy, many new cancer immunotherapy things coming to fore. The folks just, they just gave a Nobel Prize for immunotherapy not too around that time. So it was for PD-1 discovery and all those and the immune checkpoints in between. So there was a lot of information going on. It was nice to read about it. I thought it was a good field to go into, from like the idea of like trying to see what I could learn about cancer research and contribute to. Yeah.
Great. So,
Yeah.
what are you currently doing in how are you trying to address this burden of cancer in the world and in Africa?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm completely at the bottom of the food chain, so I'm not I'm not contributing anything massive or anything serious. But for my project, which I'll talk about, we in our group we work on like killer immune cells primarily. So there's certain types of immune cells that have the ability to kill other cells. Oftentimes they kill cancer cells or cells of our body that are infected by, say, foreign organisms. So some of them are called T cells, some of them are called natural killer cells. So these cells are important because they are very powerful killers. They can interact with cells, they can perceive whether a cell has gone rogue, whether that cell has become cancerous, or whether that cell has gotten infected and needs to die, and they can induce very specialized and almost magical ways of eliminating those cells in a very quick time. So we study a particular pathway in the group where, which the pathway is known for ages as a developmental pathway. But what we've now seen is that this pathway can potentially actually help these immune cells that kill cancer cells to actually kill better, because they help them to form connections with those tumor cells or those infected cells. And those connections are where they can then deliver the poisons that they will use to kill those target cells. So we are finding ways to enhance these immune cells by manipulating this pathway I just described, so that the pathway can give them better ability to kill the tumor cells or the infected cells. So I just summarize, there are immune cells that are very good at killing. They can kill cancer cells. There's a pathway in them that can potentially help them to do this job of killing cancer cells better. And so we're studying that pathway to be able to manipulate the pathway and get it better at doing the job. So yeah, so for me, it's really a training phase. Like I said, walking through the process, trying to really get all the skills and network and the learning and knowledge I can get. But I've also chosen a particular kind of cell to work on because I think it's a cell type that is relatively easy to scale to places that are low resource. So I work on a particular cell type where, based on the background immunology, it's easier to scale relative to some other cells that are used in like developed countries where you need a lot of processing, need a lot of compatibility between who you're getting the cells from and who you're giving it to for the treatment of your cancer. So I work on another kind of cell where very good at killing massively, but also has the ability to, to be delivered off the shelf. So it can be stored without much concerns about like who you're giving it to. So I'm just trying to say it in a very simplistic way. So yeah, but then that's also why I've developed interest in the cells. And I think going forward, I might base a significant part of my further work on that cell type. Yeah.
Great. So you are trying to manipulate a pathway that allows immune cells to kill cancer cells and ensure they kill them better. So great, interesting. I think how you provide, I love how you give this very simple and easy to understand explanation of your concept. I know you said like you're still in like the early stages of your work, but I don't know if there were like any one or two findings that you made, maybe surprising findings that you've made about your work or your research generally that you can just highlight. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't say surprising per se. I think so. We found that there are ways that you can enhance this pathway such that they can actually form the connections I talked about very well, and then they can deliver, the poisons to kill, which is quite interesting because what is currently known about ways that people have enhanced this kind of cells to kill better is by loading them with what is called cytokines. The cytokines are good, but what that does is that it can potentially get the cells to be tired very quickly, so they get exhausted. So by just focusing on this pathway that doesn't affect their cytokine, doesn't overload them. So just think about cytokines as if you're beating somebody to perform function. So if you beat, the person will run faster. But after a while, if you beat, they get tired, right? So, but by doing something inside this person themselves so that they get energized sort of from inside, you don't need to like stimulate them externally. So that way, we think that by this discovery, you can achieve improved killing without exhausting the cells. And I think that's probably a very important angle to come from, to add to what is already available in terms of how to enhance immune cells. Yeah.
Interesting. Really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
So you're just trying to change, focus on the pathway and then change the maybe the nature or the certain qualities in the cell without injecting so many cytokines or chemicals into them. Yeah. Really good. So you've spoken about how you are where you've taken interest in a particular cell type that would find application in low resource settings and contribute to tackling the burden of cancer in low resource settings. I don't know if you can tell us a bit more about those cells and maybe specifically what kind of cancers are you interested in Africa? Because I think the distribution of cancer varies with location and all of that. So what cancers do you think you'll be interested in, and tell us about those cells and how you intend deploying them to tackle the disease?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still a bit of a dream land away, but particularly, I think certain things. So I'm going to talk broadly, then I'll put my research a little bit into this.
Okay.
So broadly speaking, there are things that need to need to get increasingly, increasing attention at home, right? We need to think about how are people financing cancer care, because so many of these big therapies, many of these novel therapies are expensive. So when you think about how people accessing financing cancer care, we need to think about how is cancer research being funded, and where's the money coming from, if there's any money at all. And then we now need to think about how do we make sure that the kind of therapies that we're preferring for people are the ones that actually we need back at home based on the genetic makeup and based on diverse immunological systems and all that. So that's why I think it's a bigger question. But again, why I've said I took interest in natural killer cells is because there are cells that are that can kill actually without necessarily what we call MHC recognition. So they don't need that compatibility and presentation for them to be able to kill. They can just sense a stressed cell or a cancerous cell and then can kill the cell. So based on that, they've been lauded as potentially promising off the shelf, meaning that I don't have to make something new for every person that I want to treat with cancer. So I could actually just have it, mass produced, keep it on the shelf like every other medication. And then when somebody needs, I could infuse into them almost like, of course, there will be fundamental checks, almost like blood transfusion. But that way, the entire process of making new, say, if it were T cells you were thinking about, it's very, very laborious, it's capital intensive, and it's also manpower intensive. And all of that would limit how much you can scale in low resource settings. So that's where I think that we need to start thinking about what immune cell types are prominent in tumor types in our own environment. We need to answer that question fundamentally. Which ones are the strongest correlates of response? Because we also need to think about the spectrum of infectious diseases that we have, how that affects, the immune microenvironment, even in tumors. So, for instance, I give an example of a kind of cell that is called gamma delta T cell, right? So this cell, it's a type of T cell. It's not a very popular guy, just a low-key guy, but it's very, very important and very, very relevant in protecting parts of our body, especially those that are exposed, like the skin, like the gut. That's the intestinal lining, and they're incredibly important in those places. But if you look at the blood of a Caucasian, for instance, you probably find less than 1% of this cell. But if you look at potentially somebody from Eastern Africa or some Western Africa who have been exposed to massive amounts of malaria or some infectious disease, you could probably find up to 20% of their T cell population being this cell. So these cells are constantly doing a lot of surveillance work. They are primed already. So we need to tailor our own immunotherapies to really, what is already happening based on our spectrum of infectious disease exposure and what the immune cell types are. For now, I'm actually mostly tissue agnostic. That means like my work is not particularly focused on like one cancer type. Okay. So, but I use cancer models. I've used melanoma models. I also use some blood cancer models. I think in the future, I'm going to be focused on solid cancers for my career because I'm going into surgical training as well, and I'll probably focus on, say, a solid tumor. I don't know which yet. I think it might be hepatobiliary and pancreatic, but I don't like to say yeah. But yeah, I think solid tumors. I think the burden is also there's burden of hematological malignancy as well, but usually stronger in the pediatric population as opposed to adult population in most parts of Africa. So, but we have huge infection-driven cancers like liver cancer, and then from hepatitis B, hepatitis infection, and of course, like some other infections like HPV with massive cervical cancer driving. So I think I probably focus my career on solid tumors, but again, things happen and things can change. So I usually don't necessarily, but yeah, I'm very fascinated at just understanding how the immune system can help. Yeah.
Interesting. So I think I love how there was the way you were weaving infectious disease into the conversation, because you mentioned that they can influence the kind of immune cells and then also contribute to the development of certain cancers. You've mentioned cervical, HPV. I think it's a buzzword now. Everybody's talking about HPV vaccines and the cancers. Yeah. So I think I want to ask maybe a bit away from research now, but concerning collaborations, because for someone who is working majorly on cancers, I think if you want to address some of these issues, you would have to collaborate with other individuals, maybe those who have experience with infectious disease or other aspects of the immune system. And I think you also talked about how that different Africans can specialize in different approaches to tackling cancers, and then there could be this, we are trying to fight the same problem but from different directions. So I want you to comment on collaborations, maybe how you've leveraged it, if you have, in your current work, particularly in the African context, and then maybe what we can do better.
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, primarily focused on my PhD, but I have some things that are very dear to my heart as well, and some pet things that you pursue. So first for my PhD, yeah, I mean, it's impossible in a very fast-paced environment like this place in Cambridge, where like everything is almost always done in collaboration with somebody else with expertise. So parts of my projects are strongly directed, strongly supported by collaborations with very, very, very prominent and accomplished people in the field that are supporting with expertise and resources from the US, for instance, from Imperial College London, so primarily for my PhD project. So that's that's unthinkable. I think we need to do better, particularly in where we're from, in thinking of in Africa and thinking about collaborations, in trying to really have truly multidisciplinary teams. I remember in one of my fondest things in medical school was a very, a friend of mine and I, we started what was called Students Research Network, where we sort of forced people to be in research teams with people from other departments in the university. So I was on a team, I was a medical student, I was on a team with somebody from psychology or potentially economics, and then we just found a problem in the university that was multidisciplinary and said we wanted to answer it. So it's sometimes not natural, but I think it needs to increasingly be the case because it almost every problem is multidimensional and you need like multidisciplinary teams too. So collaboration is very important. We need to homegrown collaborations, equitable collaborations, not just north-south unevenly distributed collaboration. I'm not even trying to just say buzzwords, but like reality, because things really happen in some of these collaborations that are not fair and they don't drive anything forward. So my personal perspective is that to be able to, I don't like just saying, oh, blame me. I don't cry to somebody to change. Yeah, if we are going to have a say at the table, and that has to start from homegrown solutions, homegrown collaborations, and of course extending and getting support from different parts of the world, because of course that's what the world is now. It's global. So I think collaborations are very important for growing students. Find ways to inculcate the habit. For established systems, we need to make sure things are multidisciplinary, and then we have a very strong collaborative spirit. Yeah.
I think the whole issue of maybe funding and research and talking to African governments, I like to say it's overflow. Even when I have conversations with some of my friends, we're like, let's stop this thing, because it's like African government, they probably would not respond. But I think a few things are happening maybe more recently with the AU and some a few policies or innovations to strengthen Africa's local capacity for doing certain things. But I think maybe from your own end, maybe I should phrase this question this way: what do you think could be done better to strengthen research and in the continent, both locally and also maybe internationally? Of course, you talked about homegrown solutions. Maybe do you think maybe we need to have more scientists in policy making, more scientists going into government? Would there be like an approach to tackling the challenges? Is it that the government do not give so much attention to research because there are no scientists in our government system here in the continent? Or what thoughts do you have on that before we delve into that?
Yeah, I mean it's a very simple yet complex situation. The simple answer is fund. Support. I think it's simple, and I don't think we're going to. There's no way to sugarcoat it. To be honest, I don't think things are going to happen from Herculean individual efforts or small group efforts. Things are going to happen from big pushes from private sector, but you would need government buy-in almost every. You need government support for it to become the state of affairs. You would need for it to be. Yeah, so I think I don't like to bother myself too much because of course individually you want to but like until it becomes that, it's not going to become the way of thinking that, wow, there's a problem as a country, what's our contribution? Find a solution to this big scientific problem. As a continent, what's our solution to developing these vaccines? So there are going to be silos of individual Herculean efforts. They're going to be pushed from private sector, but so I think we just need to keep asking and keep hoping that we get that from content. But again, so that shouldn't limit how individuals can aspire, try to train themselves, try to get training against sometimes huge limitations. And also I think a lot of effort is beginning to come and should continue to come from private sector as well, and private push for really opportunities to grow local solutions and contribute to investment in research. Because the problem with collaborations in that sense, and which I don't really blame most times too much, is if a collaboration is driven from elsewhere, by definition, most of the sustainable fruits of that collaboration will remain elsewhere. For instance, if there's a collaboration where you needed to, work on samples or develop something, most of the resources, for logistical reasons, right? Most of the machinery and all of those things would not be here, right? So after that problem is solved, when the next problem comes, you have to look up again. So that's what I mean by, like, yeah, there are going to be, so unless, and there are very good models now. You think about ASGID, African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases, fantastic. That was where I held my first pipette when I started getting interested in, I wasn't interested in infectious disease research, but I was very interested in learning immunology, learning science. So I went there for a 6-week internship actually after my medical school, and that was the first place I got exposure. Phenomenal work. That's good. Initially driven by funding by the World Bank, right? So that's good, but yeah, you know where we're going to in that context. So that's very, and we already see the impact, very massive model that when you keep the resources at home, when you keep the manpower at home, this is what is achievable, right? But for it to become the way of life, then it doesn't come from anywhere else. Any country we're thinking about, it doesn't come from anywhere else. It has to become naturalized, for it to become that, we can address these problems ourselves.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. And glad you mentioned HD. I think they're doing a lot of great work in the country, and also globally. Even there, I think there are also a couple of other institutions across the continent. Yeah, thank you. So, what time management technique works for you?
I don't know if I have a technique. I think the best thing is I plan a lot. I think almost seekingly sometimes, like almost try to have a map of my day on my head. Almost on some days when I have like very long experiments in the lab, some people laugh at me. Sometimes I have every minute of the day of when I'm going to be in the lab. So I know from 9:30 to 10 is when I'm supposed to move this plate to this place. From 10:30 to 12 is when I'm supposed, because otherwise it can go like really, when, I mean, not every day, but when like things are really tight. So I think I don't think I'm the most efficient person at all. But I think at least when things are necessary, to really have a plan, I think it helps me to also like settle anxiety, and I know that, okay, this is how the day is supposed to go, and then I sleep a lot. I sleep decently, so I make sure that I don't abuse sleep too much while I am here before I go back to clinical training. So where that choice might not be there. So I think getting good rest and then like planning as well as you can. I think planning really helps to helps you manage. It helps you know when you're going off track with time, and then helps you keep to things that you've planned to do. Yeah.
Planning. I think we can't overemphasize its importance.
Yeah.
So so I think that already gives us an idea the kind of person you are. So you like to just prepare ahead. So you don't like to just step into things and then there's no direction. So building on that question, like what are like some of the core values or principles that you built your life around over time, like that foundation that you built upon that has, I think, gotten you to this place that you currently are, and placed you on this current trajectory?
Yeah, okay. I like trajectory better because I'm nowhere yet. I'm near where I'm hoping to want to be. But yeah, I think fundamentally, to begin with, is my faith. So I have a strong Christian faith, and I hope to continue to grow it and nurture it, and that's helped me to withstand many challenges, and of course, just it's just a source of joy and growth from huge challenges of life, and also just as a person. So that's helpful. I try to enjoy my support system, which is my family, my loved ones, my fiancé, and make sure that keeps me in focus, thinking about like the people that matter most to me. So primarily my faith and my family, keep you grounded and, always remind you of the things that matter to you more than all the, hustle and bustle of life. But in terms of I have a very strong desire to grow and to learn, and then to make sure I'm doing my best whenever I'm given opportunities, especially when you think about coming from a place where, or coming from personal scenarios, even growing up, where there weren't so many opportunities afforded you. So when you do get opportunities, you want to make sure that it comes natural to try to make sure that you make the best and the most of those opportunities. So I think that also drives me. And then things, integrity, hard work, all of those things that you say, I try to, guide myself, or, so once in a while you go away, you try to make sure that you keep the hard work back in line and you're not losing track. So yes, those are the things I would say are very important to me.
Yeah, thank you very much. So family, faith, discipline, hard work, and I think there's that constant pursuit of just giving your best at everything you do. Yeah. Great, really amazing perspectives or values that you have. Yeah. So I think one question I'm interested in also asking is regards the kind of work you do and the kind of techniques that it involves that you had to learn and to do your work efficiently.
Yeah. So I mean, our group is a fundamental immunology group. So we love to deal with the cells and deal with them directly. So I'll just start with the most potentially most basic. We do a lot of tissue culture for immune cells, like manipulate them in different ways. And then, like, of course, as you expect of any immunology lab, a lot of flow cytometry. So phenotyping the cells, looking for what we might be interested in. And of course, because we also study connections between cells and their target cells, immune cells and their target cells, so we do quite a significant amount of microscopy as well. High resolution microscopy, very fancy, super resolution microscopy to enable us see into the details of the cells, how they form synapses, how they sometimes migrate. So so I've picked up some of those skills, and of course fundamental molecular biology skills like as qPCR, Western blots, cloning. Those are some of the regular things I do every day. So basic immunology, and also work with human cells, samples to get immune cells from them. So all of that processing and the same thing we do with, I also do mouse work. So work on mouse models or specific mouse models of immune cells, where they are conditional knockouts where certain cells that we're interested in express certain genes or certain with the way we want them to express it. And that's also a very fascinating part of what we do in the lab. Yeah.
Great. So I want to ask about maybe mistakes or errors. Are there any mistakes or errors you can think about or share that you've made in the context of any of these technical skills that
of course.
you can share?
I have a very fun story. Of course,
Okay.
everybody has to. Where maybe there's some geniuses that were born with science. But I remember the first time I tried to I don't know whether that's too net, but I tried to make a cell pellet. I didn't remove the supernatant, and so I froze down my first experiment. I froze down the supernatant with the pellet, thinking that was a cell pellet. So that was my very first attempt in this PhD to save some cells which were useless. So I think even in terms of technical mistakes, I think that's completely expected, because even for people who had had significant experience before starting PhD, so I don't think that's off. So the important thing is to always be mindful of those mistakes and then try as much as possible not to repeat them, and at least not the third time. But I think generally that growth just happens from first year compared to third, fourth, fifth year. You just see that the growth has happened significantly. I think so I've made mistakes, of course, almost on every single thing I just listed in my previous answer. There will always be mistakes. Maybe another mistake tomorrow, but nothing so serious. But the important thing is that over time, the frequency of mistakes have significantly reduced. And again, the other part that comes into it as you grow into that training is that you can anticipate mistakes or potential mistakes. For me, that's probably the strongest part of when you know that, okay, somebody is now growing, is that you cannot say that, oh, if I don't ask this my senior this question today, tomorrow when I'm at the machine, I might actually don't know how to do the compensation and all that. So that I don't waste that sample tomorrow, I do better by asking today. So I think that's the fundamental part of growth that comes with everybody here.
Yeah, interesting how you chipped in that listening to it about how that as you grow and get better, mistakes are normal, but they should reduce. The frequency should reduce as you grow, and then it's possible to anticipate mistakes and you know just hit them off before they come or before you encounter them. Yeah. So thank you. I think I've had a very really fascinating chat with you, and I love the kind of work you're doing. Really, really interesting. And
you're the one doing the interesting work.
All right. So I think it will not be possible to have this chat without talking about Ganglion Initiative and the amazing thing that you and your co-founder or co-founders are doing. What's the initiative about, and what are you currently doing? What have you done? What are you doing? What was like the future like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a privilege to talk about it. I mean, I like to just say the backstory and the gutter story. Than what I mean. It's been it's made some very modest contribution and growth over the years, which we're happy about. But it really just started by random conversation. Oh, there's an event somewhere. Three of us, can we just go and talk to this? So we started with an A-level school, then where I went to, and we thought we could grow this into something bigger. So it was really just a random conversation as to, okay, us thinking about some of the, counseling, when you think about some of these other sophisticated places, they're already informing you by the end of, these are the places you can apply to, these are the things you can go on for. These big scholarships, for instance, in that some people have gotten like Rhodes or Gates, for instance, in the UK. There are offices in the United States, for instance, where from second year, they're already identifying students and they're reaching out to them and they're having one-on-one coaching sessions for them and say, oh, this is how to get the gates, this is how to get this. We have absolutely nothing of that such. In fact, sometimes a war to even get your transcript to apply for some of those things. And these things, maybe at university level, people can find information better and people can, pursue. But oftentimes at high school, where most people are, very limited, especially when you think about public schools, resources are extremely limited. Counseling services are very limited as well. And so we thought that, and when that damage happens at that point, it can have a huge impact, especially with progression to tertiary education. So I think the place where, and the numbers say about 80%, I don't remember now, or 70% have challenges progressing to tertiary education from high schools. When you think about in Nigeria, we think about Lagos a lot, but Nigeria is so big, that progressing actually that critical point. Oftentimes when people can scale that point and get to tertiary education, they are able to, at least because they now have they are better socially positioned. There are people from different walks of life who come to university that they mix with, so they can, maybe just go online and find information for themselves. They can jump. But that valley between high school and tertiary education, we think is the most fundamental in getting people to achieve full educational ambition. And that's why we thought we were going to start with targeting that and see, talk to people at high school as they're just coming into senior secondary school, SS1, really start to reshape how they think about life and how they think about higher education and hopefully get a few more people to scale over that. So it's been that journey that started since 2017, where three of us were still in medical school, were a lot more involved in the day-to-day. We used to organize the outreaches almost every quarter and all that. I go to now we sort of because we are removed now, so we have people who now do the day-to-day running while we just provide oversight function. But it's something that is very dear to me, and so that's what we do in the organization. And I've not talked about the day-to-day activity, but I've talked about really the idea behind it, because that's what I like to talk about. The day-to-day activities can change from time to time. So we do outreaches to schools. We sometimes organize online programs for people to think about scaling postgraduate studies, and then sometimes we actually provide soft scholarships for high school students to really cross that boundary. I think that value is the most important part, especially when I think about my own life, where if some things did not happen at that point around my high school, I would never go to university, because it's just not going to happen. And there were people that were there at that point who made that that transition possible. And all of what has come after that will be completely impossible without that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think you're doing a lot of work. And while you're just thinking, while you're speaking, I was thinking that, wow, you did a lot during medical school. And
I always feel, but thank God.
So yeah, well done. So well done, and really inspiring work. I think before we take the few 1-2 form questions I have for you, I just want to ask what are your next steps after you wrap up your PhD program? I know you said at a point you said there weren't specifics about what you're going to work on, but just give us like maybe as much as you can share.
Yeah, so I've been in school enough, so I hopefully should get out of school. Yeah, I often joke about like post-secondary education is now yeah, more than a decade, and I think it should end. So I'm hoping to actually go back into clinical training, and I'm currently even in an application process. So I want to go back to clinical training. I'm hoping to be able to build a program over another decade where I get very good clinical training to become a specialist, and then I can do my clinical training, my clinical work together with technology-driven global oncology research, translational research, where we can actually hopefully accelerate, some of these discoveries in ways that are possible for access in low resource settings. And we think that, I mean, there's never been a time where they talk about technology and what things can do to accelerate some of these discoveries have been like this. So that's why I'm hoping to, to build as a program. So my immunological work, my other cancer therapeutic work, I hope can fuse into my clinical activities and my clinical practice, and be able to scale globally, especially to back home. Yeah, it's what I hope to do. So, but the straight answer, next step is my clinical residency training.
All right, so I wish you the best with your applications and
Thank
all
you.
the amazing plans you have in store in the future. Yeah.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm going to ask you two random phone questions, and I think the first question I would like to ask is just tell us who, when you think about your specialty or interest in cancer immunology, or cancer immunotherapy, or cancer immunology, who are those scientists you look up to or scientists that inspire you? They don't have to be Africans, but just generally, globally, which scientists inspire you?
Yeah, that's going to be a long list. I just like, I mean, my interest in cancer was particularly, ignited. Well, I'd been thinking about non-communicable disease generally, but when I read this book, Emperor of All Maladies, which people are probably fine.
Yeah.
So there are probably a million scientists in quote that was talking about there. But fundamentally, I think at this formative stage of one's life, the person you get to work with on a day-to-day basis is very important. So I'm very inspired by my supervisor because of the way she thinks about science and the way she like actually commits to like making sure everyone is supported. So I mean, and this is actually not me just trying to make sure I pass my PhD. This is but yeah, so globally by many scientists, I'm not going to mention names, but yeah, people who do especially translational work, I found reading about their work very, very promising. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So the second task I have for you will be to your interest is in cancer. So I'm thinking you should spell cancer, but each of the letter would be replaced by a term in your work, or a term, instead of saying C, give us a term in cancer immunology or immunotherapy that starts with a C. Instead of A, give us a term that starts with an A. You get?
I'm going to, so CANCER. Okay. So C, I'll probably say co-receptor. Okay.
Okay.
Co-receptor.
Okay. Yeah.
A, I'll say antibody.
Okay.
So that was the easiest one that came to mind. And I'm going to say neoantigen for N. Neoantigen.
Okay.
Yeah, neoantigen. So yeah, cancer neoantigens. There's another C. What are we going to say for the other C now? Besides co-receptor. Okay, I probably come back to that. E, immunology. I'm going to say IgE.
Okay, I think that works. Okay.
I'm going to say receptor. There's a lot of receptor interaction in immunology. So what I'm going to say for the second C, I don't know. There's no int in this thing.
I think there's an immunotherapy that you could work with. You've talked about it a bit.
Oh,
during the
checkpoint.
interview.
Yeah, checkpoint.
Okay.
Checkpoint. Checkpoint. Yeah, I already said co-receptor. Okay, yeah, okay. That's good.
Great.
I forgot.
So you have co-receptor antibodies, new antigens, checkpoint inhibitors,
Checkpoint.
IgE.
Yeah, I said IgE for E.
Yeah, that works. And how you have
I could
receptors.
say endosomes or something, or endosomes or something.
Either of them works. So great. So thank you so much, Segun, for the chat, and thank you for making it lively and fun and engaging, and for telling us about your journey, your work, and of course, wishing you the very best with the next phase and the many future phases that you'll be stepping into. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure. Thanks, and you too enjoy.
Thank you for listening to this episode on ImmunoAfrica. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it with your network. You will learn first about future episodes and get other immunology related updates by following ImmunoAfrica _other Immunology in Africa podcast on social media. See you on the next episode. Bye.